She lied, they believed, and I lost everything. Now she's back, and this time, I'm not running. I never thought my life would unravel so fast, so violently, over a lie so absurd it should have collapsed under its own weight, but lies, when told with enough conviction, can bury the truth, and mine got buried the day Megan, my friend Jason's sister, looked my parents dead in the eye and said I got her pregnant. I was 25 at the time, living back home after a rough patch with work, trying to get my feet under me again, and Jason had always been my rock. We'd known each other since 3rd grade. Been through everything together, but nothing prepared me for this. Megan, 22, had always been kind of off. She flirted with everyone, chased chaos like it was oxygen, and she'd had more boyfriends than I could keep track of. Not that I judged, people live their lives how they want, but she never once showed interest in me, not seriously, not until she started showing up at my house randomly while Jason was out. She'd linger in the kitchen, ask too many personal questions, brush against me in ways that didn't feel accidental, and I kept my distance, always made an excuse, always left the room. I didn't think much of it, until one afternoon she showed up in tears, red eyes, shaking hands, said she needed to talk to my mom. I had no idea what was happening, thought maybe something had happened to Jason, but then my mom came downstairs pale as death, looked at me like I was a stranger, asked if it was true, if I'd done something unspeakable. I was so confused I couldn't even speak. Then Megan walked down the stairs, lips trembling but eyes calm, too calm, and said I'd gotten her pregnant and was refusing to take responsibility. I laughed at first, genuinely thought it was some sick joke, but the room stayed quiet, deadly quiet. My mom slapped me, not hard but enough to knock the wind out of my belief that this would blow over. My dad came home and it got worse, yelling, shouting. My denials fell on deaf ears. They asked for proof. Megan held her stomach, said she was 2 months in, said she hadn't told anyone else because she was scared, because I'd begged her to keep it quiet. It was all lies, every word, but she played the victim so perfectly it didn't even matter that we hadn't spent more than 10 minutes alone together in our lives. My parents didn't want facts, they wanted someone to blame, and I was the easiest target, the son who'd dropped out of grad school, who'd quit his last job, who'd come crawling back home just to mess everything up again. They kicked me out that night, threw my clothes onto the porch, told me not to come back until I was ready to take responsibility for what I'd done. I begged, I screamed, I swore on everything I held sacred, but they didn't want to hear it. My mom called me a coward. My dad said he was ashamed I was his son. I slept in my car that night, parked outside Jason's place, but I couldn't bring myself to knock. What was I going to say? Hey man, your sister just destroyed my life with a lie and your family's eating it up. For weeks I drifted, couch to couch, trying to scrape together enough money for rent. I took temp jobs, delivery shifts, anything that would keep me from thinking too long. I didn't speak to Megan, didn't speak to Jason, didn't speak to anyone who might have heard the story, because deep down I knew it had spread. Poison always does. The silence was worse than the shouting. People didn't confront me, they just avoided me. Like I was contagious, like I'd done something unspeakable and they were too polite to say it to my face. Eventually I ran into Jason at a grocery store. He looked surprised, like he'd seen a ghost, asked how I was. I asked him if he believed it, what Megan said. He looked away and said he didn't know what to believe, and that broke me more than anything else had. I realized then I had truly lost everything, not just my family, but my best friend, my anchor. All because of one lie told by someone who had everything to gain and nothing to lose. But here's the thing about lies, they rot, they fester, and eventually, they unravel, and it took time, nearly a year, but the thread finally came loose when Megan's pregnancy vanished into thin air. No baby, no hospital visits, no swelling belly, just excuses, miscarriage rumors whispered without detail, timelines that didn't add up, and Jason, bless him, he finally started to put it together. He reached out to me, told me he was sorry, that things weren't making sense, that Megan's story was falling apart and she was dodging questions. I didn't even know how to respond. It was too late for sorry, too late for guilt, but I needed the truth out there. I needed it like oxygen, like redemption, and I told Jason everything, every weird encounter, every time she showed up uninvited, every time I tried to back away. He didn't say much, just listened, and then told me he'd handle it, that he was going to get answers. And he did. When he confronted Megan, she didn't deny it, she didn't even cry, she just shrugged and said she did what she had to do, said she needed help, said her ex had dumped her and she didn't know what else to do, and when Jason asked her if she cared that she'd ruined my life, she just said, "He'll get over it." But I didn't, and I haven't. Because my parents still haven't apologized. They know the truth now, Jason told them, showed them the inconsistencies, the text messages Megan had sent to her ex still saved in the cloud, the ones where she admitted the baby was his, that she'd blamed me because it would be easier, because I had no one to fight for me, because she knew they'd believe her over me any day. And they did. They believed her. They disowned me. And now that the truth's out, they want to talk. But I'm not ready. Not yet. Not after what they did. Not after how fast they threw me away. I ignored their calls at first, let them stack up in my voicemail like corpses in a forgotten war, their messages sounded forced, brittle, like they'd practiced every word, my dad saying he wanted to make amends, my mom whispering my name like it meant something now, like it hadn't shattered on her tongue the night she told me to leave and not come back until I was man enough to admit my mistakes, except I didn't make a mistake. I was the mistake, at least in their eyes, until they realized. Megan was the one who'd lied and by then it was too late, too damn late. They invited me to dinner, said they wanted to clear the air, I didn't respond, I couldn't, not after I spent nights sleeping in my car, skipping meals so I could afford gas to get to my shifts, not after I spent weeks spiraling in shame over something I never did, replaying every second of every interaction I ever had with Megan, trying to see if I'd done anything wrong, if I'd ever led her on, if maybe, just maybe, I had been the one who triggered it all, but the answer was always no, I had been kind, cautious, distant even, and that had been my crime, I hadn't wanted her, and she hated that. The first time I saw them again, it wasn't planned, I was grabbing coffee after work, still in my delivery uniform, smelling like sweat and city fumes, and there they were, my parents, sitting on the patio of the cafe like they hadn't burned me alive and danced in the ashes. My mom stood up when she saw me, tried to hug me, I stepped back, my dad looked old, more than just aged, shrunken. Like guilt had started to gnaw on him in places pride used to fill. They asked me to sit, I didn't, they said they were sorry, I didn't respond. They asked if I could forgive them. I laughed, not loud, just enough for them to feel it, just enough for the hurt to leak out like steam from a cracked pipe. I told them forgiveness wasn't something they could buy back with apologies whispered over cappuccinos. I told them they'd chosen their side when it mattered most and they'd chosen wrong. And now they were the ones living with the consequences. The thing is, Megan didn't just lie about me, she'd lied to herself too, she'd spiraled after the truth came out, people started talking, friends started pulling away, even Jason moved out for a while, said he needed space, said he couldn't breathe around her anymore, couldn't look at her without remembering the wreckage she left behind, and Megan didn't handle the silence well, she started showing up at my work, just standing outside like a ghost, not saying anything, just watching, and when I asked her what the hell she wanted, she said, I didn't mean for it to go that far. But she did. Of course she did. Because people like Megan always know how far their fire will spread, and they light the match anyway. I got a restraining order after the third visit, I couldn't risk her spinning a new lie, couldn't risk history repeating, not when I'd finally started to rebuild my life piece by jagged piece, not when I'd finally gotten my own place, a new job, a fragile sliver of peace. And then Jason came back into the picture. He apologized again, for believing her even for a second, said he'd broken ties with Megan, said his parents were trying to get her into therapy, but I didn't care anymore, it wasn't about Megan, it was about the hole she left behind, the crater where my trust used to live, and no one, not Jason, not my parents, seemed to understand how deep that hole went, how it kept swallowing things even years later. But Jason had something for me, evidence. Turns out Megan had confessed the whole thing to her ex, in writing, a full breakdown of her plan, how she'd chosen me because I had no one to defend me, how she'd made up the pregnancy and used an old ultrasound from a friend as proof, how she'd manipulated our parents by crying at just the right moments, how she thought maybe I'd take her side if I believed she was carrying my child, like I'd somehow fall in love with her out of guilt or obligation. It was disgusting. But it was also vindication. Real, tangible proof that I had been innocent all along. I took that proof and mailed it to my parents, didn't write anything else, just the screenshots, just the truth. 2 days later, they were at my doorstep again, this time not with apologies but with silence, my mom in tears, my dad staring at his shoes like maybe they could walk him back in time. I didn't let them in, I couldn't, not yet, maybe not ever, because trust isn't a switch you flip, it's a bridge you burn and maybe, if you're lucky, rebuild plank by plank, but only if the other side wants to meet you halfway, and I wasn't sure they ever would. I'm not the same person I was before Megan lied. I'm colder now, sharper, not meaner, but harder to reach. And maybe that's what survival looks like. Maybe that's the cost of betrayal. But one thing's for sure. I'll never let anyone bury me in someone else's lie again. Weeks passed after that doorstep encounter, and I kept expecting them to stop showing up, to finally give up and let me vanish into the silence they'd once thrown me into without hesitation, but they didn't. Instead, my inbox filled with letters, not emails, handwritten letters, like they thought bleeding ink across pages would erase the years they chose belief over truth, delusion over evidence, Megan's story over my voice. And each letter started the same: we didn't know, we thought we were protecting her, we thought you were hiding something, but all I read between the lines was cowardice, weakness, betrayal disguised as parenting. They asked to meet again, this time not to talk but to listen. They said they wanted to understand what it had been like, those months I spent alone, cast out, crucified for a lie that wasn't mine. They said they had no idea how much they'd broken me, and I told them I wasn't sure I even remembered who I was before they smashed my foundation to dust. I told them I wasn't some prodigal son waiting for the right apology to come home. I told them I'd built something new from the rubble, and I didn't need them in it anymore. And still, they kept trying. Because people like my parents can't stand being the villain, not when they've built their whole lives on the fantasy of righteousness. They needed me to absolve them, to patch the cracks in their delusions, but I wouldn't give them that. I didn't owe them that. The truth came out to more people eventually. Jason, bless his guilt-ridden soul, shared everything with our mutual friends, posted the screenshots online in a moment of fury after Megan cornered him at work and screamed that he'd betrayed her, and suddenly the tide turned. The whispers that used to follow me, the eyes that once looked away, now turned toward her, questioning, accusing, some even apologizing to me. But it was all noise now, the kind that bounces off walls and never touches the soul, because the damage had already been done and no public redemption arc was going to restore what I'd lost. Then Megan snapped. Not publicly, not loudly, not dramatically, she just unraveled in silence, quietly slipping from denial to paranoia, started calling me, begging one day, threatening the next, crying about how she never meant for it to destroy me, just scare me into being there, as if manipulation was a form of affection, as if trauma could be bartered for attention. I recorded every message, kept every voicemail, sent it all to the lawyer I'd finally hired, because I wasn't going to play victim anymore. I was done playing anything. My restraining order became permanent. Her family sent her out of state, some rehab center for pathological liars or something like that, and for the first time in years, it felt like I could breathe, like I could exist without holding my breath for the next explosion. But just as I exhaled, my parents sent another letter. This one different. No apologies, no begging. Just one line. We've cut ties with Megan, and we hope someday you'll believe we're trying. And for the first time, I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel anything. I just folded the letter in half and burned it. Because forgiveness isn't a reward for trying, it's earned by bleeding for what you broke. And they hadn't bled, not really. They'd watched me bleed, and now they were scared of the scars. They wanted to pretend the wound was gone just because it wasn't gushing anymore. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. And I wasn't going to forget. Not the couch I slept on. Not the hunger I swallowed like guilt. Not the jobs I juggled while they sat comfortably in their righteous home, believing their son was a monster. I wasn't going back. Not for them. Not for anyone. I started therapy after that, not because I was broken, but because I wanted to understand how I'd let them break me for so long, I wanted to learn how to stop craving the love of people who only knew how to weaponize it, and piece by piece, I started reclaiming myself, the version of me that didn't flinch when someone said, family, the one who could say, no, without guilt wrapping around my ribs like chains. And then something happened I didn't expect. Jason's mom reached out. She asked to meet, said it was about Megan, said it was important. And despite everything, I went. Not because I trusted her. But because I needed to know what came next. I met her at a small diner just off the highway, the kind where the coffee's burnt but the air feels honest. She looked older than I remembered, smaller somehow, like years of guilt had worn her down to something brittle and breakable. She didn't say much at first, just stirred her coffee until the silence between us felt like it might collapse the table. Then she slid a manila envelope across to me and said, "You need to see this." And that's when I knew this wasn't just another apology tour. Inside were letters, handwritten, shaky, raw, from Megan. Dozens of them. Unsent. Never meant for anyone, just thoughts trapped on paper, madness captured mid-fall. She'd written them during her treatment, Jason's mom said, and in every one, my name appeared like a bruise, like a haunting, sometimes regretful, sometimes venomous, sometimes pleading for forgiveness she didn't deserve. But there was one letter near the end that struck me hardest, because in it, Megan admitted the truth behind the lie that wrecked my life. She hadn't just picked me at random. She'd hated me for years. Because I was the only one who never adored her. The only one who didn't fall under her spell. She wrote that she'd watched me for months, studied me like a blueprint, learned my habits, figured out how to make her lie believable, down to the exact time she'd tell it, the tears she'd use, the trembling voice, the moment she'd accuse me of something so vile my own parents wouldn't question her, and she was right. They didn't. She said she did it because she wanted to feel power again, because life had spun too far out of her control, and I had become the symbol of everything she couldn't manipulate. She destroyed me because she couldn't possess me. And reading that, I realized something. I hadn't just been collateral. I had been the target. That shook me more than anything. Because it meant all that pain, all that suffering, it wasn't accidental. It was personal. I asked Jason's mom why she was showing me this now. She said Megan had checked herself out of treatment early, vanished without a trace. They hadn't heard from her in weeks. And then the calls started again. Blocked numbers. Silent voicemails. Heavy breathing. It started for them first, but then Jason got one. And then she said something that made my stomach drop. "She's coming back, and we think she's looking for you." I should have been afraid. But I wasn't. Because this time I wasn't the same person she'd broken. This time I had power. I went straight to the police, handed over the letters, filed a report, expanded the restraining order, set up security at my apartment, and warned every employer I'd ever had, every friend I still spoke to, because I knew this wasn't over, not for her. But it was over for me. Because I'd made a choice. I wasn't going to live in fear anymore. I wasn't going to waste one more second waiting for people who should have protected me to finally love me right. My parents sent another message when they heard Megan had disappeared again. They were scared. They wanted me to come home. They thought maybe we could face it together. I didn't reply. Instead, I wrote them a letter of my own. Only one line. "You chose her once, you don't get to choose me now." And I mailed it with no return address. Because they didn't need to find me. They needed to lose me. For good. Now, I'm engaged to someone who believes me without question, someone who holds my pain like it matters, and I've built a life that's mine, scarred and complicated, but mine, and when I look back, I don't see a victim anymore. I see a survivor. Megan's lie burned down everything I had. But from the ashes, I built something real. And I'll never let anyone take that from me again. So what do you think? Am I the villain for refusing to forgive? Or just the only one who finally said enough? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe if this story hit you where it hurts. Because sometimes the only way to heal is to burn the bridge and never look back.